2, 1. Okay. So first what we need to do is to access the regulator. Obviously you need to take the bottle off, let it depressurize, then you need to get the front gauge off, which is your bottle gauge, not regulator gauge, and then we can go into the stripping of the housing. So I'll get through this first and then I'll then start talking again once we get to the regulator. So remove the front gauge. Now we can access the inner adjusting part to extract everything out from there. Inner adjuster. Bit stuck on that one. Just got it on there. Yep. Okay, so sometimes you'll find the inner piston or plunger will be stuck onto the actual outer brass housing. This can be normal depending on how swollen the O-ring is on the inside. Sometimes they come out, sometimes they don't. It depends on obviously if this part has stuck on the inside of the actual rifle. So we'll take these washers apart and then give them a clean. Okay, at this point with the inner piston, you check on the top for any impregnation from the actual adjuster piece itself, of which, if it's the new type, it is domed rather than having a point which can then punch on the inside. There's slight markings on this one, so this one will get changed to a new one. Now we just clean the washers off. Because what you don't want is the grease to be on the washers. They need to be friction free. Some people go as far as polishing the Belleville washers so that they're absolutely friction free. personal preference. So go as nuts as you like. Last two. Okay, so with putting the washers onto the inner piston itself, there's many different combinations of how you can put them on. You can have one way, one the opposite way, or you can have two one way, two the opposite way, two one way, two the opposite way. Each will have different effects and give you different curves upon how the regulator will operate. I would advise, see what's in your rifle. That's obviously giving you the results that you're experiencing, and then you can always change the combination if need to give you a complete different overall setup or performance of the regulator. You can also go down the line of different thicknesses of washers. It all depends on your overall setup. Each gun is completely different, each regulator is completely different, each washer is completely different. So depending on how many you have, you can have anywhere between 8 to 16 depending on the power of the rifle and caliber of the rifle and how it was set up from FX. But obviously, as it came from the factory is how they've obviously found it to work consistently. But if in your hands it's not as consistent as you would like, then you can also play around with combinations to play with your setup. But obviously you have to strip it down this far every time just to change the washer combinations, so I wouldn't recommend it every single time. So I'll start with two one way, two the other way, and see how we get on with that. With also in regards to washer arrangement, if you have the cup side of the washer facing on a narrower surface, you're almost eliminating its sort of travel, whereas if you put the domed side of the washer up against the smaller surface, you then have the exact travel that's desired from there. So two one way and then two the other. Obviously at this stage you need to make sure that everything is clean and that you don't rub the washers on the actual shaft or the tip of the shaft, because it has a flanged edge which is used for extracting, but also you don't want to score the shaft so that the O-ring on the outer brass housing can't then leak past the scoring. So as we have here, two one way, two the other way, we have the cup side facing up because that's the side that is the larger diameter of the brass, which is on here. So large surface side on large surface side, small surface side which would then have the small surface side. So when they sit together they can sit and give you the correct spacings that's required. So just double check all of that. Just recount those. Just to make sure. Two there. I did get two the wrong way around. So let me rejiggle that. Okay, so Like I said, sometimes there could be two one way, two the other way, or there could be one way, one the other way. It all depends on, again, the overall setup. So as we have here, it's two one way, two the other way, but all because they are the smaller thickness of washers. You can eliminate some washers and put some thicker ones in to give you similar sort of curvature, but obviously if you have mostly thin and then a few that are thick, the thicker washers will all bend at a different rate than the thin ones. So the idea is, you know, you can mix and match, which is what they do from factory, to give you a complete different overall result. I can't tell you how this will be versus your own rifle because each is completely different. So once we get to this stage, you have got a very fine O-ring on the inside in here, which is not the easiest to get to. If you ever get to this stage of stripping, then I'd advise taking it out, because you can put it back together with it in there, but it will just leak. So you have to strip it again and take it apart. So this can take a bit of time getting this out, but we'll do the best we can. And with the right tools, it's easy to get it out. Shoes. Okay, so this here. There's the brush. Always lubricate the O-rings before going back in. Almost in. Okay, she's in. So once we've got to that stage, the idea now is to place the inner section of the regulator housing and insert it inside. I'll just put a small coating of oil onto the washer, just to make sure that they have some oil on, as they are bone dry. This is just silicone oil. Also stops them from rusting as well, in case you are in damp environments. And then we grease the end of the piston with silicone grease. Let's take some of the excess off. And that's what you don't want to do, drop all of the washers. So back all in order, grease is on. This is now the messy part, as you've obviously got everything lubed. Handy to have your wipe rag here. Okay, so to insert you have to put it in the correct way. Just make sure there's no dirt in there. There's no dirt in there. Just locate it. Okay, that's that part done. So now it's seated in. Next part is the outer brass housing. I give the threads a nice coating just so I can get the old O-ring off and slide the new one in its place. If you're wondering why I'm holding the rifle, it's purely because the washers are loose on the inside, and the last thing you want to do is tip the gun onto its side and they all fall out. So now they have lube on. Just checking the inside of that one. I'll quickly change that at the same time. Small piece of grease on that as well, as it's an internal O-ring, so you need to make sure that all areas are greased. That's now seated in. Perfect. Okay, and now this part can now go into the housing and get screwed in. You don't want to over tighten this, it just needs to be snug and come to a stop. But with pressure and through use it can settle, and obviously it can be difficult to come back to back it back out if you need to go in there again. So now you can then lay it down, nothing will fall out. And we inspect the outer brass adjuster. This one has a slight mark, so I'll replace with a new one. And again, a small grease on the O-rings. Gently set it in. And this part, you gently screw it down, feeling with your hands where it comes to a stop. Obviously you'll have the O-rings, you'll feel resistance with those, but you'll know when it comes to a complete stop, and then you just half turn. That way you're not pressurizing the system on a completely sealed regulator. It is partially open and you can adjust from there. So with that being done, you now need to put the bottle gauge back on. I just put some grease on the threads just to help it glide in, as this is brass going into aluminium. If your gauges have a specific alignment, then obviously tension it to the alignment and see if it will leak, as normally general rule of thumb is once they've been moved, the seal underneath has been squashed, may not seal back tightly again once you've undone it. So now that's aligned, put the bottle on, and then we can go into setting the reg pressure from there. So this particular regulator, half a turn from closed is around 30 bar. Now with a new seal, a new sealing surface and a new adjuster, they do need time to bed in, so don't go gun-ho and turn everything, get it exactly where you want it, start shooting and then check it and then it's adjusted and you'll be fighting yourself after that. So I would advise, once you've got a new setup or anything that is new on the inside, it will take some shots to bed in, and it isn't some shots as in 1 or 2 or 3 shots. It could be half a tin of pellets, it could be a full tin of pellets. You have to bed it all back in. So I would advise roughly setting it at the bar edge, set the power, because obviously it will need to be set once you've gone into there, unless it's back up to the same bar edge it was previous to stripping it all down. Once you've done that, go out and shoot, and then just check it after a week, reset it. After a week's worth of shooting, that's every single day's worth of shooting, the regulator should have bedded in. Otherwise, if it is weekend shooting, it could be a month down the line that it's bedded itself in, then you'll need to readjust and go from there. So I'll just set this regulator so it can reset. Slowly comes up. Almost there. Okay, I'd advise to set it under what you would like and then take a few shots, let it settle, because the regulator has to move and be cycled so that all of the Belvilles are in unison, and obviously the O-rings are doing their job. Let it set. Now, if anybody is asking or going to ask the question, why does the regulator gauge act slower than other manufacturer of gauges? Simple answer is, underneath the regulator gauge there is a set screw which is like a restrictor for the airflow to come through up and into the chambers where they need to go. You can take the screw out, it doesn't really make a difference, but obviously then you're taking components out of the rifle which could lead to different results or different accuracies, or just not really working all in general. So leave the components where they are. You can have a look at aftermarket gauges if you find that they're inadequate, but ultimately the gauges do one job and one job only. It's to give you a reading and an identification of what the pressure is set to. When you shoot, it's now down to the mechanics and the barrel to do its job, firing the pellet down range, not staring at a gauge when shooting. You would view these two like the rev counter and speedometer on your vehicle. So you're only taking them as a glanced average or as a glanced setting of what the rifle is doing. The rest of it's now down to the shooter and the mechanics of the rifle. If you still have inaccuracies on the rifle, then you can just double check your barrel alignment, make sure that the barrel is clean or polished, make sure that the hammer area is completely dry and no lubrication inside there. We have seen a few rifles with lubrication in the hammer. That can cause some anomalies with chrono results and consistency of hammer striking on the valve. The idea is they need to be kept clean. So the gauges are for setting purposes. Obviously one is for bottle pressure, one is for reg pressure. That is all. You set the reg pressure to what it should be. If over a period of time you're finding that power is dropping off, then what you would then do is shoot the rifle and watch the gauge, and obviously if the gauge keeps going down and down and down every time you take the shot until it reads 0, then obviously the regulator is stuck. If the regulator gauge when shooting now starts reading bottle pressure, now you've got an internal leak. But if the regulator is acting as it does and it drops down and comes back up to the same mark every time, the regulator is working perfectly fine. It's now down to the rest of your setup. So hope this helps. It's a simple little video of how to get into, adjust and basically service the regulator. There's many other videos around, so you can have a look at all of them. But that's this particular video. We're here in the UK. I'm Liam from Effective Tuning. Thanks for watching.